All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, all fans of all ages, I am Beast Mike you. Now ride for my train of thought. It's time to talk about Miami Mock Mondays. We only got a few of these left. Like I said before, there will be Miami Mock Mondays until the Monday before the draft, and then the Thursday, the day of the draft, at least night one, I will do one final Mock Monday, if you will, on a Thursday leading into the draft. I don't know where I will be for said draft, but I'll figure that out, and then there will be videos that will react to at least nights 1 and 2 of the Dolphins draft, because there's obviously going to be a lot to talk about with 7 picks in the first 94. Anyway, let's get to business with those 7, plus all the other stuff that Miami might have on this mock. So, with the 11th pick in the draft, the board kind of shook out very differently, yet back to a player that I had taken previously in one of these mocks. I've taken quite a bit, honestly. And this one was a Buckeye. It's Sonny Styles from Ohio State. A linebacker that can play anywhere, I think, on the field when it comes to the linebacker core, maybe even some safety if he absolutely had to. But that 4.3 speed is absurd. I don't think he's going to fall this far, to be honest. I think he's just way too talented to. Off-ball linebacker stuff, I think he could be a very dominant player. And with that speed and that cover range, I think he could really show off his talents. And I think he's just overall it's best player available on the board here for me. And a lot of the other guys I would have liked to have taken and probably have taken in previous drafts, like Maui Goa and Delane and the receivers and Caleb Downs, all of them were gone at this particular mock. So I ended up taking Styles, the BPA type of dude. And his player comp, if he turns out to be him, I think you will gladly take it. Future Hall of Famer Fred Warner. And he compared to him because he's a Mike linebacker who can cover almost everywhere and is very athletic, absurdly so, and he's very good in coverage, very good against the run, which Miami, again, could certainly use, even though we had an excellent off-ball linebacker in Jordan Brooks. I think he's going to be a really good teacher if this were to happen. I got no problems here. Or he can even stick Styles to the outside until it's Brooks' time to go, and then you can put him back inside and go to work there. So that's the route I would go here with Sonny Styles at pick 11. So at pick 30, I almost got the dream scenario where I could have taken Vega Ione at 30. He fell to 28 in this particular mock. And I ended up getting Maxine Anchor with the 30th pick once again. And like I've said all along, I want maulers. I want 2 of them on the right side. I cannot go through another year where the offensive line isn't right. And with a receiving core that's at the very least underwhelming currently by a lot of people's standards, and this includes the tight end, even though Dolchich was fine, I want to make sure that Malik Willis and the running backs have enough time to go to work as best as humanly possible. So I want to go and get a mauler that could eventually become the right tackle of the future. Can he play some inside guard? Yeah, he actually can. He's done so at ASU. So that's going to be a good look for now. Very raw, talented. I think Ian Anchor can become a really good eventual right tackle when it's his time to, in the event of Austin Jackson not being there for 2027. Yash Neiman, once again, wants the player comp because of the physical, raw style, and he can get a little bit better in pass pro. But in terms of run blocking, dude's a mauler, and I think a day one starter in that particular realm. So that's the route I went here with Ian Anchor at 30. And to fill the other spot on the guard, on the offensive line, I think we desperately needed to get filled, which is the right guard or left guard if you want to move Joe to the right. I went with Chase Bisontis, which I previously went with in one of these mocks, I know, and he ended up being available in this one at 43. So I just couldn't do this anymore. I had to go get another mauler up front, and Bisontis is a good zone blocking type of guard where, once again, we are a zone blocking type of team, so that I think that just generally works out pretty well. So Bisontis can play on the left or the right side. Either one works. That's the route I go. Ideally, I go left to put Joe to the right, and we move forward from there. I think that just works out way too well for Miami's offensive line if we're able to get this. And his player comp, and I know this may sound disrespectful because he's a New York Jet, but his overall game, I don't think is that bad. I think he's a very good player when healthy. Elijah Vera Tucker. I think he's a very good guard who played some tackle, like Bisontis did, played some tackle at Texas A&M. He just happened to be way better at guard, and I think that's the route I would go here with Basantis. And ABT has shown himself to be a very good player when he's not getting injured in Denver, because both 2 seasons ended in Denver with injuries. And I think this is just the route to go here if we're able to get Basantis. Just put him at the right guard spot or the left guard spot and keep it moving. So the next pick for Miami was 75. And I had to wait for the receivers to fall properly. And in this case, fortunately, one of them did, in the form of Bryce Lance. And I think you've heard me say this comp quite a few times over the last few weeks and maybe month or so. Christian Watson is a perfect comp because the 6'2", 6'3"-ish size and 200 some odd pound frame, not to mention the fact he's a burner. I think he could be a more consistent, less injury prone Christian Watson, I think is the true ideal comp for Bryce Lance, considering where a lot of these guys came from. Getting a newer version of Christian Watson, I think, generally works here. And I will go this route and put Lance on one of the outside, maybe as my X receiver going forward. That's the route I would go here, 75 if available. So at 87, needed a corner. And Julian Neal turned out to be the one available to get. A lot of the major corners kind of went early on in this draft, unfortunately. So Julian Neal, I think snagging him, the 6'2", I think 210-pound corner, snagging him at this spot, I think turned out to be a good look. Just an overall sturdy corner, just an overall sturdy DB. And that's kind of what we need here. Just outside boundary corners that could do their thing. I think we got some decent nickel corners, got some decent corners inside. I do want to see more of Juju Brents, like I said previously, amongst the corners that we've signed in the offseason. And I think Neal could help the cause on the boundary. And his player comp turned out to be Carlton Davis, Super Bowl champion Carlton Davis, who has shown himself to be a pretty good corner and a little bit over the top with the speed, not quite there. We saw Tyreek Hill kind of do that as a Chief. That didn't work out so well. But I think Davis has shown himself to be a pretty solid, stable corner over his career, especially in Tampa and somewhat in Detroit as well. Stability outside, I think, also works here. If they're gonna it doesn't seem like they're gonna keep Douglas or Jones. So getting some boundary corners, I think it's just a really, really good idea here. Next up, went back to the secondary and to the safety room. And I went with Bud Clark, safety from TCU, a ball-hawking safety, a safety that can be a really good playmaker. Not as ideally good against the run as I think I would like, but in a free safety, I need a ball hawk. I simply need a guy who can go get the ball, make a play on it if and when necessary. And this turned out to be a pretty good comp for me. I think it's a very appropriate one. Kirby Joseph turned out to be the player comp for Bud Clark here. And then Joseph, as we know over his career, has shown himself to be I want to go get the ball and need to go get the ball today type of dude in my vicinity, or in his vicinity, if you will. Joseph, I really liked as a very good safety and a great safety combo with him and Brian Branch. I like his game a lot. And Bud Clark, comparing to him, I'll take it. So I missed out on getting DDS, as you would probably know. Like, wait a minute, where's Denida Sutton? And unfortunately, he was not available for me to take. I think he was gone in the 70s, to be honest. I think he was gone before the Neal pick. So with that in mind, I decided to go to the Big Ten and still give me an edge rusher with some power game to him. Derek Moore was my pick here with the 94th pick in the draft. Power game. There's some speed to power here. So it's a quick burst, and he uses it well. Not necessarily a speed rusher, not necessarily the most fluid because of his bend ability. It's not quite elite, but the power game is there. And I think he can certainly be a productive foil, if you will, to the speed game that is Chop Robinson. And this is a perfect time for me to mention this Bill Barnwell trade proposal that he sent out earlier today. And I got to ask all of you guys, would you do this trade of Chop and the 30th pick to the Ravens for the 14th pick? I'd have to highly consider it. And to be honest, if that trade were to go down, then hope for a pass rusher, one of the main ones. Obviously, you're probably not going to get out of Reese, but hope for like a Reuben Bain, hope for a Derek Bailey or Kendrick Falk. One of those three would have to slip to 11, and I could take him at 11. And then I would honestly take Vega only at 14 if that were the case. regardless of how the board would go. I would need one of those high tier edge rushers to make that work. I'd have to know that one of those guys is going to fall to me. To be honest, though, I probably don't do it. I probably don't do it because I would rather try to build with Chop and see if JES and especially Jeff Hafley and company can build with Chop Robinson's speed and his abilities to be a very good speed rusher, and see if we can get him back to his rookie year where he was looking like he was going to be next up as a very good speed rusher. I still believe in Chop Robinson, so I'm probably not doing this trade, but it's one I would at least consider. I wouldn't poo-poo it. Anyway, back to Moore being basically the opposite of Chop when it comes to the power game, where he is power and he is muscle. Both guys have good motors, and Moore has a very good one. And it's kind of ironic that I went from talking about a Michigan man to a Nittany Lion back to said Michigan man, and now I'm going to go to Ohio State with his player comp and Sam Hubbard. I get it. A Michigan man being compared to a Buckeye would probably be one of the worst things you could possibly say about a Wolverine or a Buckeye, comparing one to the other. But that is the case here when it comes to Moore, where he's just a sturdy, very solid, very productive defensive end. And what was pretty much what Sam Hubbard was his entire career, where he was incredibly sturdy and incredibly productive. I would love for a Hubbard type. I think that would be a truly solid way to go here. With the 94 pick, if I can't get DDS, I would love to go get a Derek Moore. I think that would be perfectly fine. Next up on the list was going back to the cornerback room, and I wanted to go get me another boundary guy, and Devin, as far as I can tell, no relation, at pick 130. I did kind of want to go get Malachi Fields if I could, but he wasn't there anymore, so that's fine. So I pivot to the cornerback room and get me a guy who could also be a tall, physical guy who could play in some zone, who could play solid man, and use his size accordingly. He's 6'3" frame, because he is 6'3". And if we've learned anything about Hafley and company and in JES, is that they want some tall, physical corners. They want size in the cornerback room. And me drafting two guys who are 6'3" or 6'2" in the case of Neil, I will gladly take that. And Devin Moore, compares similarly to another guy, Igbinosun, who I mentioned before in mocks past, fit the more physical size type of mold at corner, where they're not overly going to beat you over the top per se, or at least they're not going to be the ones to keep up with the super burners, but they're going to be the ones that are capable, I would think, of jamming you at the line and ideally throwing you off your routes and things like that. And his player comp, though it could have been Rick Wolin, similar to Igbinosun, another player comp that I saw was Joey Porter Jr., which I think I've used for various other corner comps in these mocks. And with Joey Porter, very handsy and similar to Devin Moore here, and not necessarily as adept at getting NOs as Moore seemed to be at Florida, which I think is a good look. But I think it's a fair comp. I think it's a fair way to say, all right, that would be a solid way to go with this pick in this late in the game. So I did want to double up at the edge rusher game, whether I got DDS or not. I would like to get two edge rushers out of this, since obviously letting Chubb go and then trading Jalen Phillips earlier in last season, I would like to get another edge rusher to kind of help with the depth. You can't have too many edge rushers after all. And Anthony Lucas turned out to fall to me here in this with this pick. And I really like his game in terms of the power. He's just straight up power, where Moore is a bit of speed with his power. With Lucas, it's just straight power. It's straight bull rush. It's straight just physical strength and just overwhelming people. He can collapse the pockets pretty well. And if he's going to compare to a current pass rusher, perhaps Super Bowl champion George Karlaftis, I think I can take that. I think I would roll with that tremendously and add some more power to the speed game that we may have when it comes to Josh Uche, for example, and David Ojabo, both those Michigan guys. So I'm adding another Michigan guy and another Big Ten guy in Lucas, and his power compares to George Karlaftis, who tends to beat people with just a whole lot of muscle and a whole lot of physical strength. And with Karlaftis, and I think the other thing I wanted to subconsciously pay attention to with both these edge rushers was that they're pretty solid in the run game as well, in terms of run defense. And I wanted to also make sure that that was addressed because, to be honest, that needed to be addressed and needed to be shored up to a better extent because, let's face it, we just didn't have that as well as we should have, despite having an all-pro linebacker. So I wanted to see that get addressed to some degree, and this was the opportunity, I think, to address it. So I got 2 picks to go, and you probably noticed I didn't draft a tight end at all, and that ends here. With the 227th pick, I decided to go with John Michael Gillenborg out of Wyoming, a 6'7", hulking tight end, big physical style, in the sense of his build, but his game is more of the receiving type. He's more of the athleticism type of build. And he's more of the guy that needs to improve on his blocking, sure. But when it comes to a 50-50 guy, a guy that can go get it in the red zone, that's where JMG is the route I would go here. And you're probably wondering, wait a minute, and this is his player comp, Mike Gesicki, that we had one of those for a while, and it was mixed bag, because Mike Gesicki pretty much was who he always was. A guy who could be a good receiving threat, a guy in the red zone who you can rely on, a guy who is not great after the catch, because he generally wasn't, but he was at least productive to some degree. And you're probably thinking, wait a minute, why would Miami do this again? Well, the answer is kind of simple here. The other 2 tight ends that JMG compared to are both the Packer tight ends, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. So, because of their athleticism, because of their athletic builds. Now, I don't think JMG is going to be the blocker day one that Kraft is, or Kraft is at least a decent blocker. Musgrave as well. But I do think he can develop that with the right time. And I trust these guys when it comes to developing tight ends because they developed 2 pretty good ones down in Green Bay. They helped work with 2 pretty good tight ends up in Green Bay. So I will roll the dice here. It's around 7 picks, so you see what happens. At least it's a TE2 behind Greg Dulcich. I can do worse, I would say, with this pick. And with the final pick, speaking of Green Bay, I wanted to help out Malik Willis a little bit. We were seeing the receiver room kind of go south and get soured on by a lot of fans. And I wanted to try to help out Willis with somebody he's very used to throwing passes to, and C.J. Daniels from Miami. And I'm sure those down in Miami who are used to seeing C.J. Daniels being a very good number 2 receiver. And I think Daniels is a 50-50 possession type of, I think he's more of the possession type of guy, good route runner, just a smart player, and you can't have too many smart dudes on a team. Obviously, Miami went to work in the receiving room, getting some fast dudes. Let's get a possession guy that can go get the 3rd and 8s, the 3rd and 6s, if you will, and let's just get to the sticks and keep moving. And ideally, his ceiling, if he can get there, maybe he's more of an Amon-Ra St. Brown, where, okay, he's just able to go get the ball and is not going to burn anybody in a 40 like with a 4.3 type of speed, but just the type of cat that is incredibly reliable, and in terms of Amon-Ra, a high-end version, super high-end version of reliable, and with his skills and abilities, and a very good blocker, which I would like to see, considering Miami should have a pretty solid run game, and we're going to need to see this run game be somewhat productive to take some heat off of Willis and give Willis a target that he knows and obviously played with for 2 years at Liberty. I could rock with this, and I think a lot of people would rock with this, especially Malik Willis. So there you have it. That is the latest installment of Miami Mock Mondays. I got a few of these left. Coming up this week, power rankings in both the NBA and the NHL, and in both cases, it'll be the final one of its traditional form, where I will go through all 30 teams in the NBA, 32 in the NHL. This will be the last week for that, because next week will be playoff predictions, and in the NBA's case, play-in ones. So the NBA video probably will be a little longer than the NHL one next week. But anyway, we're getting down to playoff time for both leagues, and the NHL will come first. Vancouver, you're going to be the first stop of my next train of thoughts.